A new Judge Your Stuff video where we take a fun look at a webtoon, judge it unmercifully, and maybe we'll all learn something along the way. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? Hey, Walter here, doing what I can to make webtoons and comics easier because it shouldn't be overwhelming or daunting to tell your story. I make videos about making comics, so if that's something you're into, make sure you hit subscribe and like this video. Today we're going to be taking a look at The Eighth by Jaxie. Alright, the summary reads, at the moment that Evelyn Zadani discovers that the biblical and forbidden fruit of life downfalls in Earth, she decides to join the group of 7 to obtain it before anyone else. But Darren Dietrich, an angel with human appearance and the team's leader, wants to recover and prevent its fall into evil hands. Evelyn will have to pretend to be an ally in order to devour the fruit and thus take advantage of its qualities. So this feels a little bit jumbled and out of order. If I was going to rewrite it, I would do something like, the forbidden fruit of life has fallen from heaven to earth realm. Now both good and evil search for the fruit. The angel Darren has formed a team of humans to recover the fruit before it falls into evil's clutches. Evelyn is unknowingly recruited by the team to help find the fruit. However, when she learns of the fruit's awesome powers, she decides she wants the fruit for herself. But will she be able to hide her selfish desires from her team? Okay, let's talk about the story setup. It starts with a fun prologue which sets up the fruit and how powerful it is. I mean, angels are scared of the thing and it's outside their powers to control or even capture. That really puts us in a place of knowing how high the stakes are or will be for our heroes. After that, we meet our hero Evelyn. Evelyn lands in Paris and meets these 2 people she doesn't know. We learn she's going to live with 7 other people whose names are rapid fired at us. It works on one hand because the reader is experiencing the same chaos that Evelyn is also experiencing, but I think we could have slowed it down a little, maybe a couple extra panels to kind of get us situated, clarify to the reader that she's meeting people she doesn't know and will be living with 7 people that she doesn't know, so that when we're introduced to all these characters, we're on the same page as Evelyn at least. Speaking of which, the 2 characters mentions everybody else's name but their own. I've read a few chapters already and I still don't know their names. Also, this character kind of pops up and we're not given their name either. I think it's important to make sure a character is established as soon as possible, and you should also find any opportunity you can to repeat a character's name throughout the story. It's going to engage your reader more when they know a character's name and they can become attached to that character. Besides the names, I think you've done a great job of establishing characters' personalities straight out of the gate. I know you said you're not a native English speaker, but your dialogue is still pretty strong. Occasionally, some of the words aren't really in a natural order. Here, for example, I didn't think a friend request would bring me later news that you guys got me a scholarship in Paris. That should be something a little bit more like, I can't believe a simple friend request led to a scholarship. In Paris, of all places. All I can suggest here is reading these out loud with some emotion and seeing if they feel correct. The other option would be to ask a native English speaking friend, but that is asking a lot, especially without any form of payment. Maybe you could work out some art trade for editorial work situation. Other than that, I think it's a fun premise with fun characters that will really engage readers out of the gate. Simply cleaning up a few details and just adding a little bit of clarity to the entire situation will make it easier for the readers to get hooked in the story. Now let's move on to the artwork, starting like we always start with the thumbnail. Usually I'd say this image is a little too complex for a thumbnail, but I think it's really working here. There's enough contrast to make the important objects pop, other than the snake and the face, which are very similar in hue and value. Usually we wouldn't want to see the snake, but because the snake is coming in from the left over the dark background, it forces our brains to continue that across the face so we see that form. The thumbnail also does a great job of conveying the type of art we'll see in the book. The things that people think of when they fall in love with a comic's art style tend to be, I love how you do the hair, I love how you draw faces, your colors are amazing, and you're showing all of that off in this thumbnail. Speaking of, your art is really beautiful. I can't really say much about your anatomy, posing, and expressions. They all work really well. I think your backgrounds are pretty good, definitely good enough. I would say make sure that your horizon line of your characters match the horizon line of the backgrounds that you're using. Example in this panel, if I just look at the characters, I would say the horizon line was about here. However, if I look at the background, I would say the horizon's more around here. Now, if I move the art, you can see that the foreground and the background mesh a little bit better. The characters feel more grounded in the scene. Your colors are very vibrant, but I would say pay attention how the foreground colors are balanced against the background colors. In a lot of panels, all of the colors are trying to get your attention. You want the color of important objects to jump forward and the unimportant, usually the background colors, to be a little more quiet. That can mean the background being less saturated, a little darker, or lighter in value depending on the scenario. Finally, let's talk about your storytelling. There were a few times I felt myself getting lost in the action of your comic. Let's take a look at the prologue and the chasing of the fruit scene. First, I think a nice establishing shot of this place would have been really cool. Nothing too crazy, but just enough to get a general sense of the place we're in. It doesn't even have to be the first panel. We could start on the fruit so the people are chasing it, and then we zoom out and wham, we see this really cool looking heavenly place. It would also help to establish these gates further in the episode, which felt very sudden because we had only seen empty space before and zero architecture. Looking at the first sequence, we have this character in front. They throw their spear and it hits a wall. There are a couple things here. First, we never really get a good look at the spear, and we never really see the angel throw it. So it's a little bit of a logical leap to realize that this is that same angel's spear. Also, the coloring is different. It's not the same monotone color as the other panels, so it almost feels like a different spear. So there's some potential for confusion. I mean, yes, we can figure it out, but we don't want our readers figuring out our art. It should just be as natural as breathing. The other thing is what happened to the fruit in this panel. The fact that the fruit is gone widens that disconnect in the sequence. Drawing the fruit flying away towards the camera would help connect the reader into that scene. This panel here is sort of a storytelling, sort of a lettering critique. This balloon is meant for this character down here, but the other character speaks before we see the first speaking character. So it's messing with the flow of time, which is another distraction for the reader. You could either rework the lettering, maybe something like this, or you could have done a two-part panel, something like this. The next suggestion is storytelling and a character design suggestion. So this is a set of panels. This person is about to get the fruit. Something freaks him out. Then we got some evil eyes. The person falls and then they ask what happened. So I was a little confused here. In this panel, I didn't realize they fell. I thought they were still falling. So you'd want to emphasize the impact onto the ground there. That also made the next two panels really confusing to me. I wasn't sure why they were looking back and asking what. I almost caught it. For a second, I thought someone had grabbed their foot to stop them. Maybe whoever those red eyes belong to, and I'm still not sure exactly what happened in these panels. Did the evil eyes make him fall? I'm not sure. Then this next panel of the person grabbing their head, I thought it was the same person that was just talking, which is where the character design comes into play. Three of these characters look really similar, and the lack of colors also makes it more difficult to tell them apart. When I stop and stare, I can see their hair is slightly different. I can see their outfits are slightly different, but it doesn't pass the squint test. If you squint and look at them, they all kind of look the same. Also, readers are only going to be looking at a panel for a second. They're not going to pick up on all these small details unless you call them out very directly, and we never actually get a clear close-up look at these characters. Think about pulling the camera back a little, seeing more of the character's movement and more of the scene. Let the reader see the placement of the characters in the scene. It's going to help with immersion and clarity. Now let's talk about your panels. The big thing for me is that you need to allow for a little bit more space between your panels. Having larger gutter space would do wonders for your webtoon. It would help with readability and also make your lettering feel less cramped. It would also just let the story and the art breathe a little. It would also help with pacing. Having panels so close together usually implies things are happening quickly, which is fine. But if all your panels are always close together, either you're going to lose the sense of urgency or it's going to make your readers feel anxious. You want to control it, slowing it down, ramping it up as needed for the scenes. You want a general pacing so that when things do slow down or speed up for very important moments, they're going to be more effective. They're going to have more impact. Example, in this panel, allowing more space here would allow the time for the reader to realize that time and space have passed much more than in the previous panels. This makes the scene change and the fact that everyone is now in a car driving down a road much easier transition for your reader. You could also fade this green into white to help ease the reader into this new space and time. Larger gutters will also help distinguish new panels as well. In this example, the panels almost blend into a single panel because his shirt and the lower panel's background color are very similar. I sort of have to force my eyes to see this as two separate panels. Here are a few other examples of how I would change the spacing. Your original's on the left, mine on the right. I'd also be careful about overlapping panels or art from one panel breaking into another panel. Breaking panels are fine, but I'd keep it mostly contained to breaking into the gutter, the empty white space, and not into another panel. These things are really cool to look at. Like, I can look at these panels as a whole, as a single piece of art, and say that looks freaking awesome and dynamic. But when it comes time to just actually read the comic panel by panel, these flourishes can end up being distracting when not done purposefully for storytelling effect. It's more of a visual effect, which is valid, but worth the extra thought when you're using them since they can break your storytelling. An example is this panel. Because of the sizing, it almost looks like Evelyn is outside the car now next to this guy looking at something else, like another person is coming and she doesn't care about these two people fighting behind her, even though that's not the case at all. She's actually still in the car. You can see her right here. I know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, but you want to try to limit the potential for confusing readers. It's also breaking the 180-degree rule, which I talk about in a different video, so make sure you check that video out if you don't know what that rule is. You could get the same humorous effect with traditional panel storytelling. Not as cool looking when you look at it as just a single piece of art. Mine looks pretty bland, just a box with some art amongst a bunch of other boxes. But when you're reading it panel by panel, it'll be much more effective for your storytelling. Now let's go ahead and talk about your lettering. Be careful with the placement of lettering and sound effects. Example, in this scene right here at the start, you have this laughing sound effect covering the accosted person's reaction. I can just see it underneath the sound effects. Not the most grievous case, but just be on the lookout for this stuff. Another example, which is a little bit more problematic, is here where the balloon covers up the gates that are then shown in the next panel. Not covering up the gates would have made the next panel make more sense, and it wouldn't have felt so sudden, these gates popping out of nowhere. I think balloon placement could be stronger. Increasing the panel spacing would definitely help with this. Larger gutters will give you more room for lettering placement, and it was going to feel less cluttered. You want to try to get the balloons as close to the speaking character as possible without crossing over another character or their word balloons. Here you could move the balloon up, maybe to the other side so it has more of a natural flow. You also don't want to hide balloons in the artwork. Unless there's a storytelling reason to make a piece of dialogue hard to find or see, you want to make the balloons as obvious as possible for the reader. Here, the balloon could get lost in the artwork because people are going to look at the expressions and then potentially slide past the second half of the panel because they're assuming nothing is going to be there. Moving the dialogue over their head makes it a lot more obvious for your reader. Okay, that's the 8th by Jaxie. This was a requested critique by the creator of the comic. I do not offer unsolicited critiques because I don't think it's cool to force my thoughts on someone else who may not be in a place to hear them. The link to this webtoon is in the description. Please check out the webtoon, show them some love, give them a comment, give them a like, rate them 10 stars. I know a lot of you have said you get a lot out of these videos, even when it's not your comic. So thank the creator for sacrificing their comics to the chopping block. If you want to sacrifice your own comic to the chopping block, make sure you check out my Patreon. Not only can you get your comic critiqued, but you can also get access to my exclusive secret Discord where you can ask me questions or get art help with critiques or whatever. You can also watch my monthly vlogs where I talk about behind the scenes stuff, and then also ideas for YouTube videos that I may never make for YouTube because they're too weird. You get all of that for just $1, which may eventually rise, so get in while it's still cheap, but we'll always have YouTube. And if you want to keep making comics easier, be sure to like, link, love, hug, and hit that sub button for more sweet, sweet goodness. Go out there somewhere in public, play this video at full volume and tell everybody to subscribe to me. No, don't do that because that's actually really annoying to do. Catch you in the next video. Peace.